Matt Schauf of DraftSharks.com here to talk fantasy kickers for 2024. And a lot of people probably scrolled right by this video on our YouTube channel, perhaps even snickered as they did so. A kicker video? But if you're watching this, or if you're listening to it via the pod feed, then you clearly get it. Kickers are people too. It's a position in your fantasy football league, and that means it's another way to get a potential edge over your competition. And really, winning in fantasy football is all about stacking up as many edges as we can get. The more edges you add to your game, the more ways you have to win. That's why my pal Alex Korf and his degree in engineering put time last year into building a kicker model. Yes, a statistical model specifically geared toward ranking kickers every week, and it fared very well. That every week aspect is an important point before we get into the specific player picks here. If you're like me, then you've spent most of your fantasy career just finding a good enough kicker, gluing him into your lineup, and then spending the rest of your time thinking about the other positions. When we do that, though, we're missing out on an edge. And that's why Alex runs the kicker model throughout the season and why we publish weekly rankings at the position just like every other. So consider streaming kickers, just the way you might defenses or even quarterbacks. And that begs the question, of course, what kinds of things are we looking for when we pick a kicker? One is a team's implied point total. That's, of course, when we're talking weekly rankings as opposed to full season. But the idea is the same in either case. More points, more chances to score. Pretty obvious. Number two, offenses that stall in the red zone can be helpful. Stalling in the red zone sounds bad, but it's great if you're a kicker because that means field goal attempts as opposed to extra points. And kicking a field goal is obviously worth more than kicking an extra point. Of course, even if you stall out in the red zone, that means you're a pretty good offense if you get down there often enough. So we're still looking for good offenses. And of course, we're not only looking for good offenses, we want good kickers. Duh. Just like any position, prove you can score and you become a better option. And to that end, when we're talking about streaming kickers, you don't want to just dump a guy who's scoring for you because there seems to be a nice flavor of the week available in a high scoring matchup. Optimally, we're finding a good kicker and a good offense that has been scoring for us. And if we get that guy, we can just ride him through the season. It's draft time now. And we, of course, have our full season kicker rankings available on DraftSharks.com, just like any position. They are not particularly focused on early season matchups because there is a better chance of landing that longer term answer at the position than you might find at defense for the reasons we just talked about. So you won't be surprised to see that our kicker rankings have Baltimore's Justin Tucker and Dallas's Brandon Aubrey up top. Both guys scored highly last year. Of course, in Justin Tucker's case, he's been scoring highly for a while, and both come from strong offenses. Both offenses were strong last year. They should be strong again this year. Does that mean you should reach for one of those two guys in your draft? No, because they're going early relative to the position. Both players sit among the top 3 kickers in ADP. That can mean a 2 to 3 round difference in your draft, maybe even more in some cases. So like defense, kicker's a position where I prefer to let somebody else in my league take the first one, maybe the first 2 or 3, depending on how quickly those next few go off the board. And I want to wait closer to the end and still get a guy with high scoring potential. If you look just past those top 2 in our kicker rankings, you'll find a couple such players. Number 3 on the list is Houston's Ka'imi Fairbairn, and we don't even have to project that much for him. If you look at the overall numbers from last year, it doesn't look like he was awesome for fantasy teams. Tied for 24th in total kicker points. But look a little closer, and you'll realize that Fairbairn was actually second among kickers in fantasy points per game because he lost 5 games to injury. If that happens at wide receiver, people know. No wideout who scored the second most points per game at the position is getting overlooked because he missed some time. But who's checking that at kicker? We are. And you are if you're watching this video. Number 4 on the list is Jason Sanders of the Dolphins. Sanders is going in drafts this year right about the same level where he finished last year. But there's upside beyond that number 10 ADP at the position. That upside is in the Miami offense, which was terrific last year. The Dolphins ranked 2nd in scoring. That undoubtedly helped. But Miami tied for 1st with the 49ers in touchdowns scored, ranked 28th in field goal attempts. Now, Miami is an efficient offense. We expect them to remain an efficient offense. But that level of touchdown scoring efficiency versus field goals relies on a bit of luck. And usually year to year, we see those top scoring teams on the touchdown front regress some, score fewer touchdowns the next year. And the teams at the bottom come up after having some bad luck scoring touchdowns. So we expect Miami to remain a good offense. We expect them to get into the red zone plenty. but they're probably not going to get quite as fortunate at punching the ball across the goal line. That should mean a few more points for Jason Sanders this season, and he's going toward the bottom of that top 12 territory. That makes him a pick available in one of your last 2 rounds. Of course, we have lots more kickers ranked, and you can check the kicker rankings pages just like any other position, or check the stats in your draft war room to see those projections applied to your specific scoring format. Just like every other position, our kickers use the projections we put in and are ranked by 3D value according to the settings that you input for your league. One more strategy point before we wrap up. Just because you have to start a kicker doesn't mean that you need to draft one in every league. If your league has a waiver run before the week 1 games, you can spend those late picks on an extra upside wide receiver, an extra upside running back in case of injury or some other surprise before the game start. Then simply pick up a kicker before those week 1 games and before you have to have your lineup set. If you opt to adjust the position that way, one sleeper is the Detroit kicker situation. Now it looks like Jake Bates is probably going to win the job for the Lions. It might not be him though, and that uncertainty is pushing Bates down the draft board and Detroit Lions kickers out of consideration for most drafters. But whether it's Bates or another guy who joins the team between now and week 1, Detroit sits tied with Buffalo for the highest implied point total in week 1. That's the first point we talked about in how to pick out your weekly kicker. So you can use that right away, whether it's picking that player at the end of your draft or picking them up off of waivers right before your season starts. There's sleeper potential right away in that Detroit kicker. And of course, we expect the Lions to be one of the top offenses in the league throughout the season again, and they play indoors. So if that kicker works out, you might have a guy to set in your lineup for weeks. You can check out our full kicker rankings on draftsharks.com. Just like every position, they'll adjust to your scoring system, ranked by 3D values, and they'll pop into your draft rankings when it makes sense for your specific format. And beyond draft day, we'll have our kicker model running, delivering kicker rankings every single week, so you can pick up a guy to help you that week, and maybe somebody that can help you for weeks beyond. If this is your first time checking out one of our videos, subscribe to the Draft Sharks YouTube channel for more across all the positions and various fantasy formats. And if you've watched more than one video but haven't subscribed yet, hey, what are you waiting for? Get notified when we post new stuff and support us. We're here trying to help you win. If you've been waiting this long for the right draft assistant, then you're almost out of time. Get to draftsharks.com, get the insider information for the lowest price it's ever been, get your draft war room set before your draft starts. Let us be your unfair advantage.